Hello, I'm John Furrier here at theCUBE, your host here in Washington, DC for AWS DC Summit, formerly the Public Sector Summit, of which theCUBE has been covering for over a decade. Scott Hebner is my co-host, research analyst at theCUBE Research, heading up a lot of the AI, agentic AI, causal AI. Scott, great to see you. The AI is real in the public sector, a lot of infrastructure enabling economic value, technological advantages, but people, process, technology seems to be the theme. Stephen Schmidt came on Keynote, also did an interview on theCUBE. Just a lot of action in public sector because it hits it hits the nexus of everything we cover. Physical AI, digital AI, data, agents, everything. It's a perfect storm of innovation, and that storm will either be a hurricane and decimate the not prepared, or it will help. It'll be a tailwind to sail out to the future.
Yeah, there's no doubt that AI is real in public sector. I mean, it took forever to get in this place, first of all, and it's like a college football game. I mean, it's loud in the background. There's a lot of people on the expo floor. Some of the conversations we had today, we had Salesforce, Snowflake, obviously Amazon, right? So you get the data layer, you get the agentic layer, and you got Amazon kind of coordinating all this stuff. Yeah. And there's no doubt what we've learned about the trade-offs between a secure, compliant, highly sensitive data, and how do you manage and operate in that type of environment, with the other side being, currency is that it's the innovation, right? It's the currency of innovation. So you got to balance those two things. I think we learned a lot about that today, and it reflects. I've done some 90 or so, interviews with different companies over the last many months. We did the AI Builder Summit. Yep. A lot of same things. The same themes are coming out. So my notes I have from the keynotes and walking the floor is one, on the whole public sector side, the mission that they have and the services. So AI at the edge, we saw tactical JEDI contract, that's continuing to be a big thing where data at the edge, AI security, more operational intelligence, Amazon and the CIA continuing to thunder along in a good way. AI for public good has come up a lot, transforming public services. That teased out with Salesforce with the whole Doge reference. People are now more aware of the efficiencies or the lack of productivity. So excellent theme there. Healthcare impact, surprise. I mean, it's always been but not obvious in public sector for AWS, but I believe this is going to be the year for healthcare. So I think healthcare as a public good, as well as a private category, the private market, that's a big conversion. And of course, the public sector, everyone's following the CIA's lead. They were the pioneers. So that's my big takeaway on that. The other note that's critical that come out of the keynotes and the chats is the modernization of the infrastructure, specifically the energy grids. This is a huge operating table stake. Without power, without operational energy for AI systems, Amazon regions don't work, right? So huge. The government has to fund that, whether it's here in the US, but certainly we're seeing it abroad. That's huge. These infrastructures have to be built. So you're starting to see that become not only an Amazon problem, but the problem for the public sector, because the services that are being generated by the cloud are changing economics and societal value. So you go back 10 years ago, oh, Amazon's got a hidden agenda, they want more power from the local company. No, it's translating into society directly because of the mainstreaming of AI. Right. So that's a huge kind of nuance, not an obvious story here, but I would say that story is a real Amazon infrastructure player, and OpenAI and Microsoft, everyone else plays that too. But the governments have to know that, and finally Steve Schmidt mentioned, some water company has critical infrastructure, doesn't have the talent. Right. He sees, to your question that you asked him, he sees agents coming out. So all that kind of seems to be the top line news. What's your analysis? Because that's a lot, and a market that has been slow. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack at this conference, and I think we're seeing, you go through all these technology transformations over the years, going all the way back to client server. Each one is moving quicker and quicker. AI is moving at warp speed. I mean, what we were talking about 2 years ago is now, no more interest in that. We're now moved on to the next thing. And one of the things I found really interesting is you're right about the infrastructure and the transformation of the government. And the conversation we had with Mia was really, Mia Jordan, from Salesforce was really interesting because she has experience as being one of the CIOs within the government. And I think we've all heard on the news that there are hundreds and hundreds of CIOs, things are fragmented, the data can't be shared. So it's all really going to start with the government bringing all that data together and breaking down those silos that will then enable the transformation around AI. But it was really interesting with her point of view that it's the agents that are going to help do that.
What I liked about that conversation, as well as the conversation here, and also the work you're doing, and that what we're covering at theCUBE, is that you have two kind of legacy and things going on. Legacy technology and legacy process and mechanisms. I think the legacy technology, that will flush itself out either by becoming obsolete or wrapped around AI and abstracted away. So I think the technology is a really positive sign in this industry. The process side is problematic because in government, it's so obvious that the internal politics, it's politics, between how budgets are set up, how people deploy systems, have been by design siloed. And so the entire mechanisms of culture in IT and business of government has been designed by design to be siloed. So in comes the era where silos suck and you want to get rid of silos or have security done differently or other things where budgets now have to be kind of shared. So it's like a whole nother level of like, you got to break down the old on the process side. So I find it very challenging here in the public sector, and I think whoever can make that happen on the process side will be a winner, but I just don't see anything yet. So like, it's like, I mean, the tech side, checking all the boxes, I'm very optimistic, but I'm not optimistic because you still got the lawyers and the bean counters and all that structure. People got to hold on to their legacy siloed mechanisms. What's your take?
Yeah, well, this is where I think culture is not just part of it, it's the whole game here, right? There's got to be a total change in the mindset. And I would go as far on your comment about silos suck to say, we're going from silos suck to silos can become fatal. I mean, they've got to be broken down, otherwise in this new world that we're operating in, that's the rapid speed of everything changing due to the technology. And I go back to the three core tenets of this change that we're seeing right now that we've all talked about and written research on, around this notion that the golden age of AI agents is coming, there's a new super cycle of innovation being kicked off here. One is it's about nuanced markets, nuanced domains, where the SaaS applications aren't necessarily going to reach. You mentioned the oil company, the oil infrastructure, right? Two is it's about labor spend, not just technology spend now, it's how do you create more efficient people in your labor force? And then the third one, which is most important, is it's not the SaaS model anymore. It's a totally new software model being turned upside down, right?
I think you're onto something really big there with the technology spend is not the target, it's the labor spend, the cost of people. And this is not about agents replacing people, I'm talking about that's money, labor. The cost of salaries and staff. Okay, here's my theory, I'll throw it out there. I think you're going to have two profiles in the government public sector. Ones that are going to be like, screw it, there's no way we're going to die, we're too important, we're going to win. Like the CIA people, they're kicking ass. They're going to optimize for the labor spend, and they're going to leverage the AI, and they're going to force change, and that'll have some consequences. The other one, to your point about fatal, I think some of these agencies will burn to the ground because DOJ of the world are starting to point out that the people don't change, they burn to the ground. So here's what's going to happen. I believe that smart people will come in, young generation, smart public servants, won't let it happen. So I think there's going to be an element of a third scenario where they know it could burn down, or you're in a good position like the CIA where you can advance services faster. I think it's going to be the people. So I think the real story here is the generation of leaders that are coming into the system have to save these agencies, because there's no doubt in my mind, because you're right, it's fatal flaw. If they don't do it right, they burn to the ground.
And you need technology leadership to be really infused into public sector to make this transformation work. It's a business transformation at its core, but it's technology is the only way to enable it. And I know from our research that we've been doing at theCUBE, that you look at the average private sector, about 5% of their spend is in IT and technology, 60% is in labor spend. The smart ones are attacking that labor spend, but not to reduce it. Because what you do is when you get digital labor, yeah, you can cut costs, but why do that? Keep the cost the same and do twice as much. That's what the government needs to do, is they got to do more faster, and without AI agents, it could take decades to do this.
And like Stephen Smith said, it's not just a digital problem, it's a physical problem. You got to get the physical and digital together, although he's making a security reference. I think the thing that's interesting to me, Scott, to your point, is that if you look at the research you've done and what we've collectively done, is that if you're in the public sector and you are not leveraging AI, you'll be out of business. We just talked about that, but the real game will be, okay, how do I make my services scale? Now, I'll give you an example from an observation I've had over the past 1 year. With our new studio at the New York Stock Exchange, I've got a lot of exposure to the financial markets being on the show floor. Here's what I've noticed. On earnings calls, the smart analysts aren't looking at earnings per share, the mechanisms that used to value the company, they're looking at product-led growth. So we brought this up with Salesforce. I think your point about product leaders and technology leaders is coming into the government, which has never been the case. It's always led by lawyers and accountants.
Right.
And some nerds that are on projects. Okay, I think a product-led leadership wave is coming in government. Doge is just the first wave of that, I think. Well, it's kind of a signal to that wave. So, like Wall Street, where they're moving from earnings per share and all the mechanisms of forecasting, the quarter, tons of GAAP regulations, that's sandbagging it, that's all like, what does it mean? It's opaque. The smart one's saying, the product's going to ship, NVIDIA's got Blackwell, okay, it's in production, stock goes up. They're smarter by being product-led. Product-led growth in public sector will be big, because that's where the change is.
Well, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
But before I ask that, it's not just that the public sector has to adopt AI, but as Steve Schmidt said, AI, it's a difference between AI that answers questions and AI that does things, which is a code word for, you got to take that step to agentic, right? So I think that alone's a big message, right? Doing generative AI is only a step to where they need to get. But the question for you on this, infusing the public sector with technologists and product managers that know how to apply technology, you sort of uniquely live in the Silicon Valley, where you do a ton of interviews with pretty much every company out there, and you're now, going on a year now in the New York Stock Exchange with the Wired program, where you're seeing that, side of the innovation coin, if you will. How do you, what did you learn from all those interviews that you would then, if you were now hired as an advisor for public sector, what would you do?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, first of all, my number one takeaway from the two locations and seeing that as the backbone of the conversations and the people is that we are living in a tech culture. We are in a digital, technology-first culture. 5-year-olds to 50-year-olds are all online, everyone's digitally enabled. There's a lot of chaos, of course, but I think we're natively tech. I mean, you talk to anyone who's 15 gaming, they know what's going on with AMD, Intel, NVIDIA processors down to the spec. Because why? It affects their gaming. People with gadgets, the Aura rings, to whatever you're talking about. There's tons of IoT. So I think one, we're in a tech culture. Number two, cloud has penetrated the entire infrastructure game because every startup that I talk to is born in the cloud. And has enterprise scale requirements at birth. In other words, startups are enterprise ready from day one, which means it's not just having stuff on storage and compute like the old days, 15 years ago. It's like, I got to have Amazon and all these higher level services, which makes them faster to serve the enterprise. So what I've seen there is that the government could take advantage of what we're seeing in the enterprise, which is enterprise AI is the hottest sector. So I think public sector AI will be one of the hottest areas because they are ripe for change. And here's my point. Here's my supporting points. The AI and the enterprise side is purely capitalism based. Startups, big companies fighting to serve, to get paid. If you look at healthcare, oil and gas, hospitals, these are old, antiquated, regulated industries. They have tons of data. They've been labeling shit for years. Turns out they were labeling it for the wrong reason. They're actually more AI ready than they know. So they don't know what they don't know. So I think the public sector market and the industry here doesn't know what it doesn't know, and I think it's a huge opportunity for the commercial side to come in and plow value and pour the value into everyone's cup and of goodness, because they're going to come in and say, hey water company, I'm Steve Schmidt. We can make you secure. Deploy the agents, here's your SLA, we know your workflows, done. Hey healthcare, your IT budget's not as big as JP Morgan Chase? Oh, well we serve them too, we can bring all that learnings to you. So I think you're going to have a much more turnkey, customizable, IT-like scale, and then on the regulated side, public sector there'll be a renaissance of change. That's why in order to make that happen, you got to think like a product leader. You got to think like a technologist, not a futurist, but like a pragmatic technologist. So again, it's not capitalism, but because it's set up with the data and the regulation, they're ready to be capitalized by startups and big companies that are here, Snowflake, Palo Alto Networks, the list goes on. Where you need training, no problem. There's a company called QA here. So I am very bullish. Now the wild card in all this is going to be the old incumbent lawyers and the accountants, all the people who built the process, because they're going to be like hugging those processes like a Greenpeace hugging the tree and saving the whales, right? Like, come on. Break that down, and I think the new generation is going to say, we're not going to let it burn down. I believe in America, I believe in my country, and I think it's going to be a kind of a national kind of vibe, not in a nationalistic political party way, but more of, hey, what's the problem?
Yeah.
You boomers set up and you Xers set up, we'll fix that.
Last time we were together, you made a point, and you really eloquently backed it up, that there's no better time to be a startup. Now I've mentioned that a lot to people, and someone actually said to me, yeah, it's also no better time to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
With this whole agentic movement that we're on the dawn of here. And I think what's interesting about that notion about no better time to be a startup, now obviously Silicon Valley is known for that, but in the heart of New York City at the New York Stock Exchange, and I know you've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies out there, it's everywhere now, isn't it?
The transfer, well, the startups, the best time to be a startup, it's now competitive because 1,000 flowers are blooming.
Right.
So here's the problem with the startup ecosystem. There's not enough big markets. So what's going to happen is the innovation has to come from transformation. And that also applies to enterprise AI and in public sector, because all it takes is one innovation idea and you can dominate a category. I see startups doing stuff that's so narrow, they'd never get funding, but yet they're making 100 million in ARR. And they're just getting started. It's like doing loan approvals for some corner industry. Well, they end up owning it because they're the best.
Remember I told you about the homeowner association AI?
Yeah.
They went from up to 1 million homes that they're managing through the homeowners in 2 years.
Well, this is the trend on the AI side. You don't need to have, solo founders are possible. A team of 5 are possible, a team of 15 is possible. That 15 team does the team of 150, so that you don't need a lot of people to execute. In the enterprise, it takes one domain expert to saying, I can fix a process. So if you think about the DOGE and government kind of data we're seeing, oh yeah, no one shows up to work because they're not motivated. They can't affect change. So if they can actually code up a prototype and saying, look I did some shadow AI and I just basically fixed the problem, boss. Boom, that's empowerment. So I think agency and empowerment, giving someone the agency to do something is going to be a huge underreported story in the world.
And I think you just hit on the big difference between this new era we're in versus SaaS, which is there's uncountable amount of nuanced skills and judgments and decisions. Managing a homeowners association, doing the rental contracts for government buildings. I mean, you can just go on, and if you start supplying agents to, there really is an unlimited set of markets that are niches that could become big businesses, and I think the government needs to start thinking as a startup, but not as one big startup.
Well, a startup and a biz dev organization to do an ecosystem. I'll give you an example. So your point about homeowners. I interviewed a person that said there's a community of solar, a closed community, pretty large. They all got solar. They didn't want to sell back to PG&E because the economics were shitty. So they said, okay, we won't do it. So they pooled their energy, they wrote some code, and they, as a community, sell their energy as one. And they're selling that energy out to other buyers, not PG&E. So you're starting to see a commodities exchange emerge around energy because people want energy, right? So you're starting to see that's a self-governing, that's unheard of. Because now the energy comes from the community. So a government's going to say, hey, I'll buy that, NVIDIA will buy it, the data centers will buy it, no problem.
What's your take on, clearly the government has been very aggressive over the recent months on AI infrastructure and all that, but also crypto and digital currency.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a much bigger focus on digital leadership than there was perhaps in the past. What's your take on all that?
Well, first of all, the digital's not dying anytime soon. It's only doubling the token demand because reasoning is coming into your research. You point out on a couple of interviews that the next wave of causal and thinking and true intelligence is going to require more tokens. That's the currency to create all the math for the mathematics for the AI. You need large scale systems to run those. So as more tokens are required to execute the AI that everyone's building, requires more large scale supercomputing or data centers, like what Amazon spends hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars on a year, as does Meta, Google, Alphabet, and everyone else. So what that means is, we are living in an energy bounded problem. In other words, there's just not enough energy. So that's the number one problem that I see, is that all this stuff is going to be bounded by energy, which again, opens up like entrepreneurial opportunities. So I think the energy problem will be solved. I think it'll be solved up and down the stack, how chips are made, how people will form algorithms to say, hey, let's think about how we're using energy.
Partnerships with other countries like Saudi Arabia and all that stuff that went on over there.
I think the geopolitical thing going on could be an opportunity to usher in the most peaceful era in history versus war. Yeah. So I think we're living in a world of a reset. And I think but it's energy bounded. You need power and cooling. I was talking to Amazon last week. I published it last night. Prasad, who runs all the data centers, they designed their data centers to be air cooled. That's unheard of. So most people do power and cooling with water. So it's like, they designed the data center as a computer.
So you got this AI infrastructure, then we're on the verge here of more and more quantum computing.
Yeah.
And then of course you got digital currency. There's just a lot of change in it.
So the bottom line, relation is there's so much stuff going on, and what matters is the output. What does it do for me as an individual, my community, the world we live in? Does it make us better? And I think that's where we're starting to see this conversation. It used to be kind of like, oh, that's all Pollyanna, that's all abstract. I think the intersection of tech, money, and society are coming together now because they're all related. They've got interdependencies associated with climate change, energy, education, healthcare, how we interact with each other, with tools and social networks. So this impact societal element is a huge thing. And again, like I said when I started SiliconANGLE, computer science and social science, Steve Jobs, technology and liberal arts, again, we're back to that wave.
Yep, and the government has to not only implement it to become more efficient, but they have to govern it.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting.
All right, well that's our analysis again. We are very bullish on public sector as long as the process huggers move out of the way and let the new generation come in. I'm John Furrier with Scott Hebner. Thanks for watching theCUBE.